I'm still learning how to put this into words. And you helped me to start that journey, right? So like a year ago, I'm posting online. I'm thinking I want to try and share some ideas because I think there's some value in this. And I also want to learn from other people doing the same things, right? And then you reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to do a podcast?" And I freaked out and panicked for like 4 months.
Yep.
But you're like, the way that you interact with me is the way that I interact with my students. Is you looked at me, you saw value in me, and you helped me to feel confident that I have something to offer, right? You kind of like held my hand from a far distance
Well, I
and
call it
supported me
reflective.
through that
I
process.
call it reflective. I call it reflecting. And what I try and do, what I try and do with my clients, adults, children, students, whoever I'm working with, when someone voices a concern, I try and reflect back to them the concern and ask what their options are. And I think that's what we did. We talked about what you wanted to say and what your priorities were. And I think
Yeah.
you actually did thinking in a way that maybe you hadn't put your thoughts together that way before. And I hope that that was supportive of helping you to develop what you wanted to do.
But I think like behind it is that I can feel that you care. It's
Oh,
just like I feel that you care, and that when somebody makes you feel cared for, it's supportive. And I don't know how to put that into words, but it's just it's like there's skills that we learn, and
mm.
you say reflective, but behind that is you've learned how to care about other human beings, and there's something inside of you that wants to support and help other people.
When I started teaching, I did a lot, of growing up, obviously, and if we have time, we can talk about that, my school experience, because I had lots of issues. I had learning issues, and I went to school in the 50s when they didn't have IEPs,
Yeah.
and I had a lot of trouble at school. And academically did not do very well. And in high school, was fortunate to have a teacher who made me feel comfortable with who I was because I knew that she did care about me. And when I went on to teach, I started doing workshops. My training was in classroom management, it was called then, behavior remediation. And I would go into teachers' classrooms, maybe you've had this experience, and they'd have these signs on the walls, the rules of the classroom. And there, like the 10 rules all listed. Raise your hand when you talk, and, don't say anything mean. And there were all these list of rules. And every teacher had a different set of rules because they would make them up or get a sign from somewhere, and they were all different. And so I used to do workshops with the teachers, and in my room, I had 2 signs, and they said trust and respect. That was it. Trust and respect. And the kids would come into the room and they would behave in a way that was disrespectful to me or someone else. And I would say to them, is that respectful? Is that how you want to be treated? Um, are you earning my trust by doing that? And that was the only thing I would say, trust and respect. And my kids came back after a number of years and they said to me, you know what we learned, Miss Judi? We learned that trust is earned. We learned that trust is earned because the kids would come into my class. I worked with very difficult kids, gang kids off the street. And they would say to me, don't diss me, meaning don't disrespect me. Don't diss me. Don't
Yeah.
diss me. Don't you diss
Yeah.
me in front of
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
And they learned over a period of time that if they wanted respect, they had to give respect. And if they wanted trust, they had to earn trust. Trust, I told them, was not bestowed, it was earned. That's one of the things I learned very early on when I was working with these really difficult kids. And I think that's kind of what you're saying in your own way, that
Yeah.
kids kids know what you're saying. They know your words. They hear your words. But the affect of your face, your behavior, how you interact with them, they know how you feel. They hear the words,
Yeah.
but they know how you feel. And if you don't like them, you can tell them you like them, but they can tell whether you like them or not. If you tell them they're a good person, but you don't act like they're a good person, they know. They can tell the difference. And that's one of the things that you bring to your classroom, is that you are showing your students that, you know, you care about them in a way maybe that other people haven't before.
Yeah. But how did you learn that? Right. You say you go into the class and you write trust and respect. And other teachers will have 10 rules that they take from somewhere and put on the wall. Like, how did you learn to do that, right? And why do other people maybe not learn to do that? Maybe their rules are effective, but I've been in many classrooms where the children don't feel loved. They don't feel respected. They don't feel the people in front really care about them, right? And this, to me, that is like, I will just say, like, I love my students, right? I care about them. I want to support them, and the foundation of that is that I respect them as human beings. There might be some things that they do that can be improved. There might be some actions that are not appropriate, but I still respect them as a human being. And so, like, that's inside of me. Like, when I look at the children in front of me, I care about them. I want to understand them. I want to learn to know who they are, and I want to support them in learning how to live well, right? So that they have a good life for themselves. But how did you get to that point where you knew to write trust and respect? How did you learn that? How do other people learn that?
I don't know. I can't tell you how I got to that point. All I can say is that as we interact with students, as we interact with people, if we are only concerned about them maintaining the structure that we've put in front of them, then we're not getting to know them as individuals. So if we have a rule in the class and it's raise your hand, and the child who raises their hand is the one that's given the attention, and the child that blurts out the answer because they have difficulty for whatever reason in controlling that response, they're ignored or they're reprimanded. If it's just the structure that we're interested in maintaining and not interacting with the person in the situation, then what kind of a message are we giving to kids? Are we saying to them, you know, as long as you follow the rules, it doesn't make a difference whether you believe it, whether you feel it, whether you like the person, whether you don't like the person, if you know, whether the answer is right or the answer is wrong. We have to make a connection with people. It isn't just about rules. It isn't just about following the rules. And in the workshops I used to do, I used to have a big sign in my workshop when my teachers came in, and it was, it's not about you. It's not about you. Because the kids we worked with, I used to run an in-house suspension room in a police station. And then I ran an in-house suspension room in a high school. And then I worked with street kids. We had gang kids, and we had opposing gangs that the kids that were students in our school, they couldn't be in the public school because of offenses they had committed. They weren't allowed in the public school. We had them in our school. And these kids would come in, and I worked in a DYS center, that's Department of Youth Services, where kids were incarcerated because of things that they had been. These are young kids who still youth, not treated as adults. And I used to teach there for a brief period of time. That's another story. I almost got myself fired. But if one of the things I learned was that these kids, the only thing they have in their sense of self is their sense of respect, their honor. And it didn't, whether they got the right answer or the wrong answer wasn't important. Showing them that I respected them and that if they earned my trust and that I would work hard to earn their trust and respect. And it was over a long period of time where I made every effort to give them the benefit of the doubt because I didn't know what they had been through.
Yeah.
As a quick example, I had a student who came into class late, probably most of the time, whose homework was not done most of the time, a very bright kid off the street. And I called him in after class and asked him what was going on. Oh, he just didn't have time. He was up late. He was up early. He didn't have time. He had things to do. Well, after I got to know him and he confided in me, his mother was a drug addict. He was busy taking her to the emergency room 3 or 4 mornings a week. He would spend 3 or 4 evenings a week in the hospital with her trying to do his homework so that she wasn't alone. That's what was important. And so we had to figure out a way, not for him not to be able to be with his mom, but to figure out a way for him to be able to do the work he needed to do while still being responsible for the care of his mother, because he was. Getting upset with the kids when they get upset with us, and he used to get upset with me, he'd storm out of the room and stuff. It's not about me. Behavior is a message, and the kids are begging for help when they're reacting in these explosive, aberrant ways. And rather than just putting the behavior down, we need to do a little digging and find out what's behind this. Are you familiar with Ross Greene? I love this guy. He's like one of my idols.
Tell me more.
Ross Greene is the developer of collaborative problem solving way of working with kids. He used to go in the prisons and work with kids and so forth. And his name is Ross, and it's Greene, Greene. I'm sure people who are listening who have in this country are familiar with his name. And he's changed the name now. There's a whole legal thing behind it, but it went from collaborative problem solving to collaborative proactive solutions. And he has a great quote that he's been around a long, long time, 20 years or more. And I used to use it in my workshops. And he used to say, if we try and hold kids accountable for their behavior because we think they're not trying enough, because we think they need to be more motivated to behave appropriately, we need to make them wanna, is what he says. We need to make them wanna. He says, and if we're wrong, then we're setting the kids up for failure because they wanna, they just can't. That's the big question, is why can't they? And that's one of the things that I learned. I traveled around the country to take some workshops from him around the country. He's a phenomenal instructor. If anyone has an opportunity to go into his classes, I would strongly recommend it. And I learned so much from him because coming back and working with the population of kids that I worked with, this was exactly the issue. These kids wanna, they just don't have the skills. And it's so frustrating for them. They get so angry and they take it out on me. But it's not me they're angry at. They're angry at themselves because they wanna, but they can't. And those are the kids that we have today. You know, no child gets up in the morning, Theo. No child gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to really piss everybody off today. I'm going to make everybody angry. Boy, I can't wait to get into school and cause trouble. I can't wait to. Every day they get up and they think it's going to be a new day and it's going to go well. And sometimes it falls apart. And when the kids give up because they realize it's not changing and nobody's helping them, this is when we're on the edge of losing these kids. We need to catch them before we do that. I mean, I could chat, about all kinds of things, but I don't know where you want to go with this.
I'm happy for you just to keep going. If you want a line of thought and it leads to another one, so I'm not going to interrupt you. You have to tell me when you've reached the end of a line.
That is not what you want to say to me.
It is what I want to say to you. You say nobody is helping them, right?
There are many wonderful teachers out there. There are so many wonderful teachers out there. I want to pat them on the back and tell them that I don't know if I could have survived this year of teaching in COVID land. I really don't. I work with kids now one-on-one. I work with my adults, my parents one-on-one. I don't know if I could do a whole class now virtual teaching and keep everybody interested and keep everybody motivated. But there are some issues that have arisen as a result of this. And it's not the fault of the teachers. It is because we rushed into this because we were forced to rush into it. We had to quickly get everything together and nobody was really prepared for this. And so many teachers, according to the statistics, have left the field this year because they're, had to stay home to take care of their own children, or because older teachers were afraid of contracting the virus, or because they just became frustrated, whatever reason. So any teachers that stayed in this and were able to maintain their sanity over the year, I give them so much credit. I really do. On the other hand, we do have kids that need special attention, and we have kids whose problems are surfacing that didn't surface before. They are surfacing now because of the new paradigm of teaching, and maybe we need to give a few minutes time to evaluate why these kids are struggling. The absentee rate is huge with kids who are not signing in on these classes. So we have a lot to learn from this, and I know that teachers are one of the most resilient professions, and they are, as I have found in working with them, so open to learning new things, not like many professions where you do it the same way every day. You go in, you do your job, you go home. Teachers are open to learning new things, and I'm sure eventually they will find their way through this. My next podcast that's coming up is titled The Silver Lining of Teaching in COVID Land, and there are some good things that have come out of this, and I hope that those things will be developed more productively. They're not new. It's not any big aha moment. These things have been around for a while, but they have come to the surface during this year. And I hope that they are given the time that is required to develop them in a productive way so that the kids can get the help they need, some of the kids that are struggling so much. And I can relate to those kids because I struggled myself. So that's maybe one of the ways I learned from this. And it was a teacher who helped me find my way through this.
Yeah. Earlier you talked about trust and respect, right? And I think the children that you taught, they learned trust and respect in relationship with you. So it's like children need adults who care about them and who model these things, right? So you treated them with respect, and you kind of held them accountable. You had these, trust and respect, and you said things and did things that guided them to see that maybe right now they're not acting in respect and they're not earning your trust. And so the children who came back to you and said that they learned that trust is earned, they learned that in relationship to you. And you had some ideas about how to steward their learning, and you built trust with them, you treated them with respect, and they were able to learn trust and respect in relationship with you, right? So it's the adult who's in the room with the children has to have their own life kind of balanced enough so that they can slow things down and they can not overreact, and that they can give kids like the benefit of the doubt. And so it's how to, like, my first 20 years as a teacher, just I struggled so much daily to learn how to guide, or how to steward the learning of 30 children simultaneously, right? And when I was a very young teacher, I was still trying to get over my own childhood and trying to learn how to live, learning how to earn enough money, learning how to take care of my own kids. And maybe I didn't have enough bandwidth and enough wisdom to know how to walk into a room and guide 30 children simultaneously and teach them 6 different subjects and prepare all the lessons and do all the assessments. And there's so much, like on a young teacher who walks into a room, they've got their own life, their own problems, and they've got to, there's so much that they have to manage. And how do you learn how to guide learning?
Nobody was ever born an expert. Anybody who does anything well started out being a novice. And you don't get from novice to expert without making mistakes. And the difference is that if we learn from those mistakes and realize what we did wrong, so we do it differently the next time, then we grow. And if we don't, then we don't grow. And I used to say to my teachers, the kids don't need a critic. They don't need someone who's telling them what they're doing wrong. They don't need a critic. They need someone to show them how to do it right. So if you want the kids in the class to treat each other with respect, then treat them with respect, whether or not they treat you with respect. And I will tell you a story in that to illustrate that. As I mentioned to you, I used to teach in an alternative school for kids who were remanded by the court. So the kids in our school were kids who needed to be there because the court wouldn't allow them to go into public school. And I'm not a big person. I was a little younger then, but not a lot younger, certainly a lot older than they are at the time. And I used to have these huge boys come in and wad over me, and they'd be right up in my face, and they'd be saying things that I can't even repeat now about what they were going to do and weren't going to do and what they wanted to do to me and all this kind of stuff. And they'd be standing over me, and I would stand there quietly and I would listen to them. Then I would say to them, do you feel better now? I really hope you feel better now. If I served the purpose of helping you get that out and you feel better now, then let's go with it. I'm really grateful that I was here for you when you needed me. And humor is the best way we can work with kids during and de-escalate these moments that just seem to get out of hand. Use humor appropriately, not making fun of someone, but de-escalating the situation. And there are other instances, I can give you other examples, but over a period of a year or so, new students would come into the room. And I used to call it peeing on the tree. You know how a dog goes around and marks, their territory?
Marks their territory.
Right. Well, the new student would come in and immediately I would get, be up in my face, and the kids would be sitting and my students would be sitting in the room. And this student would come in and wanted to make sure that everybody knew he or she was tough and not to mess with them. And so they would be up in my face. And the kids in the back of the room would say, will you just sit down? She's not going to get angry. Just, sit down, leave her alone. Fine. You got it out. I didn't even have to say anything because they would just have to do that. And many times in our school, we had altercations that happened in, other classrooms and out in the hall. And we had a big burly vice principal who was head of behavior issues. And so if there was a skirmish, he would be the one out there taking care of it. And whenever there was a skirmish anywhere in the school, regardless of what classroom it was in, the kids would flood into my room. I would have them up on the windowsills, on the floor, sitting against the wall, on the chairs, on the tables. My room would be filled with kids from other people's classroom. And this big burly guy would come in and he would say, what are all these kids doing in here? You let them do whatever you want it, to do. That's why they're in here. And the kids would stand up and they'd say, no, because we know we're safe in here. That's why they would be in my room. They knew I would never do anything to intimidate or insult them, but that I didn't put up with disrespect at all. It wasn't allowed in my classroom. And they respected that because that's what they wanted. They wanted respect from me, and so they gave respect to me in my classroom as a teacher. So I think that's an example of how we can be role models to kids. They don't need critics. They don't need us pointing the finger. They don't need us telling them, don't do this, do that, sit here, stand there. They need us to model the patience, the respect, the earning their trust, working hard to earn their trust, and taking the time to get to know them. Can I tell you one more story?
Please.
Oh,
please do. I love stories.
I'll tell you one more story. A couple of times in my career, I've been on the verge of getting fired. And one was in the DYS center where I taught. They actually didn't renew my contract. They didn't fire me, but they didn't renew my contract. And the students were so upset that I wasn't coming back that they wrote me recommendations. And the prison guards wrote me recommendations because they said I deserved a job somewhere else. I still have them. But I want to tell you another story. When one of the other schools where I taught, and I'm dating myself again, but this was when busing was so big in the early 70s. Are you familiar with busing?
Yes.
Okay. And our school was being integrated. So we had a lot of children of color being bused into our school. It was called a junior high at that time. They're middle schools now, but it was a junior high. And we had kids coming in, and the kids used to walk up and down the hall with boom boxes. You know what boom boxes are?
Yes, I know.
Great big radios, and they'd have them on their shoulder, the transistors, and they'd be blaring, and everybody's radio. And of course, no one ever said anything to these kids because they were big, burly kids, and nobody wanted to mess with them. And they'd be walking up and down the halls and so forth. So in my classroom one day, I had two Black girls who were sitting at the back of the class, and the rest of the class is white. and I'm trying to teach, and they're sitting in the back and they're talking and they're laughing and they're totally disrespecting my class. And I asked them several times to be quiet, and they wouldn't. And finally, after about 20 minutes of asking them to please stop, I got really upset. And I said to them, they needed to come back for detention. They just couldn't do this in my classroom. And they came up to me and they said to me, the only reason you're giving us a hard time is because we're Black. We're Black and you're giving us a hard time. And I said, you're prejudiced. And I said, you're right. I am prejudiced. I'm prejudiced against anyone that disrespects my classroom. Well, they left and they marched down to the principal. I could give names because it's still so vivid in my mind. And they reported me and they said, not only was I prejudiced, but I admitted it in front of the whole class that I was prejudiced. They did report to me at the end of school, and we ended up talking. And as it turned out, we became very good friends. I ended up going to their house for dinner on several occasions. These girls had never, I loved horseback riding. These girls wanted to learn horseback riding. I took them horseback riding. They became very good friends. And I said to them, why were you so upset with me? Why were you giving me such a hard time? And they said, because they didn't trust me, I was white. And they didn't trust me. And they needed to find out where I stood. And when they learned to trust me, then we were able to have a relationship. And so I learned two things. Well, two things. First of all, I learned I was white. Oh, I had never said that before. Sorry about that. I can tell you later. But you know, when they said I was white, I went, I am. You know, oh my gosh. You know? And even though they were mad at me, they were so angry at me, they did smile because I didn't get angry at them. So I learned that, and I learned something else because they said to me, being honest with them made all the difference in the world when they realized that honesty was something that they could depend on me to do no matter how much trouble it got me into. And I was called down to the principal's office and I was reamed out and I was told that humor is one thing, sarcasm is another, and that I needed to learn the difference. And I did learn that lesson, that kids at this age aren't too good with sarcasm. Humor is one thing, but being sarcastic is not too cool. But I also learned from them that the relationship I had with them was totally dependent on my wanting to build a trusting relationship with them. I wanted to build a trusting relationship with them, and I was willing to make myself vulnerable. I wasn't waiting for them to do it. I was making myself vulnerable in order to do that with them. So those are, you say, how do we learn these things? We learn these things by making mistakes. That's how we learn. And I'm sure you could, you know, make, you know, an argument for that with all the experiences. You know, we learn from making mistakes, but we have to admit that they were mistakes and do it differently the next time. Learn how to do it better the next time.
Yeah.
Can I?
There are, you mentioned earlier that everybody, your story was very moving, and I will come back to talk about that with you later. But you mentioned that we all begin as novices and we learn, right? And some people don't learn. Some adults don't learn. When I was growing up as a kid, when I was learning as a kid, some of the adults in my life stayed the same for 30 years. And they treated me in the same way, they treated everybody in the same way, and they didn't learn. They didn't learn. And there are many kids who are in relationship with adults who haven't learned. So like you could walk into a classroom and be with those children, and in that moment you were learning with them. you were learning in relationship with them how to support their learning. You are constantly adapting what your idea of how to support them, how to guide them. Your interactions with them were informing you. But there's adults who don't learn, and they damage children. And I'm not blaming the adults, I'm not blaming anybody, but I was that child, and I know plenty of children in my community who the adults in their life are not learning how to interact with them in a way that stewards their healthy learning.
I was that child too. I was that child too. My brother is brilliant. He's very, very smart. He's a professor at a university, a college, and he's very well respected in his field, has written things. I mean, he's always been smart since we were growing up. On the other hand, I wasn't so smart. I had trouble in school. I was the kid that, was failing things. I was the kid that repeated a grade because I couldn't move on to middle school because I couldn't pass my courses. And I struggled through middle school, and I went into high school. My parents took me to have me tested. There were no IEPs then. Nobody had any idea about learning styles. They told my parents I had a very high IQ. They couldn't understand why I wasn't doing well. Maybe when I matured and I stopped, trying to be the social butterfly, that I would, start doing better at school. And the reason I was a social butterfly because I wasn't very successful at anything that was academic. So having lots of friends was something that I could do. When I got into high school, an English teacher of mine gave the class an assignment to write a paper. And I wrote what I thought was a magnificent paper. And I handed it in, and she passed back everybody's paper and except mine, and asked me to please come stay after class, which I did. And she handed me my paper, it had a big F on it. And she said to me, "You are so talented writing. You have so many good ideas." She said, it's probably one of the best papers in the class. She said, "But you are so disorganized. There's no way that I can let you pass this paper in." She sat me down. They didn't have templates then for writing. Nobody had books where they tore things out. She drew boxes on a paper for me, and she labeled them 1, 2, 3, and 4. She said to me, "I want you to go home tonight, and I want you to take this paper, and I want you to write in box 1, what's one of the ideas that you talked about?" I told her. She wrote the name of it. She said, "I want you to write all the ideas in your paper that have to do with that." She did the same thing for box 2. What's another idea? 3 and 4. I brought it back to her the next day. She said to me, "Okay, I want you to go and write another paper for me. Each one of these is a paragraph. I want you to write your essay for me." I did that, brought it back to her. She said to me, "Okay, I want you to write a paragraph about why you're doing this. That's your opening." And then she says to me, "And I want you to tell me at the end what you learned from this." And I did. And I ended up getting an A on it. And I learned something very important. I learned from her, and I credit her this day. I've seen her at high school reunions and stuff, and I told her, I credit her with helping me to understand how I think. No one had ever done that before. And it took me the rest of that year and into 10th grade to be able to bring that process into my math class, where I used to fold my papers to do my algebra, into my biology class, which I didn't do so well in, but it did help me. in answering the questions, everything was organized, everything was separate, everything was caged, if you will, because my mind has no boundaries. Everything kind of goes together, and I have to find a way to keep them in different compartments so that I can manage what it is I need to do. And to this day, I write everything down. I have lists. To this day, everything is written down. I've learned how to do that. And once I learned to do that, my grades got so much better. And in 11th and 12th grade, I actually did pretty well. My parents didn't think I was going to be able to go to college. I ended up going to a transitional college, and then after a year, I got all A's, and I transitioned to a pretty good college, and I graduated. And after I graduated, I said, you know what? I just realized what I want to do. I want to be a teacher. And I went back to school to get certified. So teachers don't realize how, I won't say that. Teachers do realize, they do realize how important the time is that they spend with one student, because these students come back and tell them how meaningful it was for that 5, 10, 15 minutes that the teacher listened and really began to understand the struggle that that child was having. This teacher changed my life, the whole trajectory of my life, in that week. So, would you like me to share with you something that I did? I've never shared this with anybody before.
I'm so excited to be the one.
I will share this with you. I've never shared it with anybody else before. When I was teaching in this alternative school with the street kids, and I was having a lot of trouble relating to them because I'm a white girl from a small town that's predominantly white. And here I am in a school where I'm looking out at a sea of faces of not white kids, brown and black and Asian kids, and from a very different culture. And I was having difficulty relating to them. And I used to tell them every day that I hoped they learned as much from me as I was learning from them, because they were my heroes and they were teaching me. So I had a student who was probably the equivalent of 10th grade, and who was not reading very well. And he loved rap music, and he wanted to write rap. So I thought, well, that's what he wants to do. That's a great way to learn to read. So we used to spend time. He would write rap. He would teach me about rap, and we would have a thesaurus, and we would look up words to try and write rap. And I said, we need to expand on this a little bit. So I went into the community, and there was a local rap group that the kids knew, and a lead singer who had made some CDs. They weren't, nationally known, but they were local celebrities. And they offered to come into the school and run a program for the kids on writing rap. And we recorded our raps. And so I had to write a rap also. And I wrote a rap, and I dedicated it to this young man who opened my eyes to a new world and also had some struggles of his own. And if you would like, I will read it to you. I will caution you that My students told me that I rapped like a white girl. So I don't really have the rap kind of voice, but I will read you my rap. And I won't give you his name, but I call it Ode to his name, Ode to, I'll say, Hector. And it goes, yo, so you want to rap? Yeah, I'll give you the score. You got to read to open the door. Your mind's like a sponge filled with empty holes, hard to find verse when there's nothing but mold. You are a prodigy, man, be creative. From your prodigy, yo, be proud. You spit incredulous verse. There's a time to be vociferous first. You got to have a cause. Gather your boys. Spit your flames. The level of commotion is raised. School is the train ride to your future door. Words are like coal to ignite the soul. Education's the conductor steering the course. If you get derailed, come back for more, because books will open the door and settle your score. Remember, keep your hands to yourself. Respect my space. Mind your own business, yo, and get out of my face. Refuse and excuse is what you do best, because you're afraid you might fail that test. You think there's a choice, not for me. I struggle hard to get on my main plan. So you want to lay back? Well, that's okay if you want to watch TV each day. But if you want to get ahead and get respect, you need an education, man. That's the test. If you're believing that laying back will get you far, look at your boys, yo, and see where they are. Public enemies, #1. Get your facts, yo. Spit your message. Vote. Get an education, like Malcolm X says. There's power in information. That was my first time really relating to the kids. They totally respected the time, and I asked them to help me with that. They helped me write it. They helped me get the rhythm. I wanted them to read it for me so that I could get the feeling of it. I wish, I had them around so they could read it, because they did such a much better job than I did. But it was the first time that I got a look inside the culture, the music culture that they spend so much time on listening to and were so devoted to. And they started me on a path because I continued to do writing. And I've since written probably 40 or 50, I guess the kids would probably call them poems, because they're not so much rap anymore. If we have time, I might, share one more with you. I did do one. I found that they're very cathartic. When I went through difficult times, I wrote poems to people. I wrote poems about what I was feeling. I went through a time. You keep asking me how we learn, and we learn because we make mistakes, because we in retrospect we realize that the decision that we made wasn't the best. Maybe because we're fighting to be who we want to be, and someone won't let us be who we want to be. And so because we recognize that, we see it in someone else, and we see that they're battling to, be recognized for who they are and for the strengths that they have. So I think it's really important that we not be so interested sometimes in teaching, but that we are interested in listening. You know what I'm saying? It's not just about being in front of the classroom and teaching. Sometimes it's being in front of the classroom and listening.
I think while you're listening, you're learning about the children.
Yes, you are. That's exactly the point. Just even listening to them communicate with each other, you're learning about them. And I've gone through some challenges in my life outside of school. When my children were growing up, my husband became terminally ill and he died. Um, I we my husband and I now we lost our house to a fire. It was very traumatic. Um, there was a time when I was struggling emotionally to try and come to grips with who I was and what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And in the process of seeking some help, I was diagnosed with uh, trauma. And I don't think sometimes we don't want to accept the fact that we need help, but sometimes we do. And going through, I know you've gone through some challenging times, with your upbringing, and trauma comes in all forms and shapes and sizes. It's not just physical abuse. It's, can be emotional. It can be, mental. It can be loss, senses of loss. And so when we see kids behaving in ways that trigger in us a sense of deja vu, then we can relate to that. And that's when we can reach out. And that's, I think, in a way, maybe I wouldn't have traded any of my experiences because I feel that they've helped me relate to other people. But for a long while, I struggled with my behavior. And I have 3 sons, and I was a single young woman for a while. My husband died, I was fairly young. And I had 3 sons who were struggling to try and keep track of one crazy mother who wasn't making such good decisions. And that was a time when I did a lot of introspective thinking and got some help. And the writing that I did subsequent to that helped me to get my thinking together, helped me to understand who I was and why I was doing what I did. If you would like, do you remember Ricky Nelson?
Do
you remember who he
more.
was?
Tell me more.
Well, the Nelson family was a very popular family when I was growing up, and Ricky Nelson grew up as a young boy, and he became a well-known singer. And he was kind of not part of the in group of Hollywood and singing. He was kind of on the fringes of it. They gave him a hard time because he didn't follow the crowd. He was kind of his own person. And he wrote a song called "I Went to a Garden Party." And the song is about how he went to this party where there were all these famous people and how he was pretty much ostracized. They didn't really pay a lot of attention to him. You can look up the words to the song. But I decided that I was going to write a poem in his memory about being yourself, because that's what I was struggling with at the time. Everybody was telling me what I needed to do to get to be successful, to get better, to be more productive, to be a better mother, to be a better teacher, and I was struggling with all of this. And so I wrote a poem, and I will share it with you. You're probably the only person that I've shared this with. It's called "I Went to a Garden Party," and it's a song that was written by Ricky Nelson about being yourself. And I wrote it in 2006, 2007, so you can tell how long ago all of this happened. All right. The right to be who I am seems to be the debatable issue at hand. The color of my hair, the fringe on my clothes, the turquoise jewelry I wear are expressions of my heart as it develops and grows. I am not a cookie cutter person, the caboose on a generational train. Instead, I choose to be the engine that forges a generational chain, one that has the strength and capacity to carry its talented and young load, not just drag them along down some old boring road. To judge each other's worth by the style of their clothes is like judging each other's value by the size of their nose. We miss so much of life when we are afraid to select the option to participate and live without regret, to meet as many people as I can and have them choose to include me in their plans is an honor beyond measure, and one which I will not trivialize, regardless of their backgrounds or the choices they have minimized. This is not a dress rehearsal, as I so often say. Life affords us only one chance to dance in the performance instead of sit in the audience. So I struggle to find a balance in my life with things I want to do, the people who I value, and the priorities they impose. For all of their wishes are my pleasures to fulfill. I need them to understand that my desires are not theirs to recuse. I want to make a difference in this world, a difference that no one can make but me, no matter how small or inconsequential it may be. That a person's life is changed forever because of what I was able to do may seem like such a trivial goal when so many global matters are at our door. But I have a calling inside of me that I cannot decipher, a chronic ache that I need to ameliorate. And I know with all my heart that before I die, it will illuminate my soul.
That is beautiful.
Thank you. It's how I feel. You tell me that I have a passion. I'm not trying to change the world. You're not trying to change the world. We're trying to make a difference one person at a time. And I don't know if, I'm sure you remember Mother Teresa. I'm a Jewish girl, but I remember Mother Teresa. And one of the quotes of hers that has resonated with me for my life is, we cannot make great changes. We cannot make great changes in the world. We cannot make great changes, but we can make small changes with great love. And that's the way I feel. Just make small changes with great love. Don't worry about the big picture. Just make small changes with great love, one at a time.
I agree.
I promised I would do this without crying, and I did.
You are wonderful. And I think the thing about small changes is that the important things happen in relationship with other people. So like when you're with children and you see them and they see you, and there's trust and respect, it's in that relationship, in that personal, intimate interaction that change happens. Thank you for sharing your rap and
You're welcome.
And your writing and yourself.
You're welcome. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I think one of the reasons that I've been able to connect with you at such a visceral level is that you are so open about your feelings. You are so clear about what it is that your goals are. And you are passionate about all the steps that you need to take to get there. I've never heard you say, I can't do that. I've never heard you say, it's too much work. You've always written, in everything I've read, this is what I'm working on. These are the things I need to do. This is how I'm going to go about doing it. It's always so carefully laid out. And I get impassioned from reading what you write. And I get excited about it. And, I feel fired up. I kind of leave some of the things that I've written on, that you've written on LinkedIn, and I've been reading, and I walk away going, yeah, boy, I can do that. That sounds good. And it kind of gets me going too. So I'm sure other people are also taken by what you write, and that maybe we don't always share that, but sometimes when we do things like this, we don't know how many people have been touched by what we've written. And if it gives someone some illumination somewhere along the way, then all the better for you.
The reason I wanted to do this podcast is because I feel that you are a beautiful human being, and you have a beautiful voice. You have beautiful things to say, and I can feel it. I can see it, even though you didn't share any of this before, right? But I can feel that inside of you, and I feel that the podcasts that you've shared up till now are valuable and important, and you're creating this incredible library of resources to support learning, to support teachers, parents, adults who care. But I want to see more of you, of your heart, of whatever it is inside of you that's driving you. So I'm so grateful today that you shared everything that you have shared. And I just, before you go on, I want to just make sure that you understand this is not the last podcast. I'm booking you now. I have a feeling that you have not run out of things to say yet. So I'm sure we can squeeze out at least 30 more podcasts.
You wanted to know what drives me. This is what drives me, and I'm sure it drives you also. I just got a message on my website. One of my former students from 15 years ago found me, sent me a picture of her with her children and her partner. I'm not sure if they're married or not. She's a young Puerto Rican girl that I had as a student, and she was a Spitfire, and nobody would have anything to do with her. And I used to stay after school and help her work on her graduation requirements, because she was afraid she wouldn't graduate. And she would scream and yell at all the teachers, and they would throw her out. And she would scream and yell at me, and I'd tell her to come back when she wasn't screaming and yelling anymore, because she couldn't stay there. She sent me a beautiful picture of her and her family. And she said to me, I want to thank you because I have a beautiful family. I have a high school diploma, and that changed my life. That's what drives me. That one email, that one reaching out, that one where that young girl took the time to let me know what was happening in her life. That's the kind of thing. That's what drives any teacher. We're not doing it for the money. You know, we're doing it because we want to make a difference in someone's life. That's why we do it.
Thank you. Thank you for making a difference in my life. I've told you that a few times.
Well, you made a difference in my life, Theo, and you make a difference in many, many people's lives, because you are so articulate with what you write. And I wish I was as prolific a writer as you are, and as descriptive and as heartfelt and as focused on all of the different aspects of education that need to be addressed, and that and many teachers, I can tell by the way they respond to you, they are so aware of these things. Many teachers are just so overwhelmed, they don't know where to begin, but you're helping to put things in perspective for them. And you speak for me when you do these writings, and I'm sure you are speaking for other people as well. And so I thank you for taking the time to do this. With everything else that you are doing this as well. And I thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope we get to talk again sometime.
I insist that we do.
Off the record.
I think maybe that's as beautiful a place to stop as possible.
Okay.
I want to keep talking and I want to keep listening to you.
No.
I've got time, but I think we have to stop somewhere, and that was beautiful. Is there anything else on your mind, in your heart, that you want to share? I don't want to say goodbye and then you have 10 things you wanted to say.
Always, I'm not an intellectual where I sit and and everything is cerebral. I'm a talker, so I mean I could sit and talk for hours. I think this is a good place to stop. I think you've addressed everything that's important, and I agonized over whether I was going to share some of my writings with you, because I have never really shared them with anyone before, but I thought this was a good time to do that. So thank you very much for allowing me to do that.
Yeah, I want to just maybe talk about the whole issue of vulnerability, right? Like you agonized over it, but I feel everything that you said in our conversation was beautiful and profound and moving and touching. And I also agonized about doing this podcast, right? I worry about, am I good enough? Can I do it? And I will think, like, do I need to write down some questions? Do I need to look prepared? And I eventually decided that I'm just going to clear my mind, and I'm going to phone you on Zoom, and then I'm just going to be with you and look at you and listen to you and just be myself, right? And I think a lot of people, we all feel pressure at times of what we should be or what we could be or what we're not, and it distorts the beauty within us, right? And so, like, when you thank me for this conversation and it was meaningful for you, that makes me so happy, because I worried for a month, like, can I do this? Is it gonna work? Is it gonna just bomb and explode? And you're gonna look at me and think, what's wrong with this guy? Like, he didn't prepare any questions. He's so disorganized. and I think this is like within our relationship over a distance, and we've never met in person.
I know. That's so.
There's this trust and respect, and when we're interacting with each other, we create this little bubble, this little environment where I feel I can be myself, and that you're going to treat me with respect and allow me to be me, and you're going to see me, and you're not going to make me feel bad about being who I am. And I think that's what our children need. That's what the people that we interact with need, somebody to see them, and you can hold them accountable, but to see them and allow them to be themselves.
And I'll just reiterate, I believe that building relationships, whether it's in the classroom or with our family or with our friends or with my clients, whoever it is, it's about trust and respect. There is nothing else. It's about trust and respect. And I've learned to pay attention to people's words and their behavior, rather than the meaning of the words and the circumstances of the behavior, because it's what they say that is so indicative to me of the struggle that they're going through. When a child is swearing at me, when a parent is frustrating and blaming me for what's happening, the circumstances that in our sessions, that they're frustrated with me, but their words are telling me that they're the ones that are frustrated, that they're having difficulty with their managing their own behavior. I could try and defend myself, but I feel that they're sharing this with me because they trust me. This isn't something they do at work. This isn't something that they do out on the street when they're talking to their neighbors. They're doing this with me. Why are they doing this with me? Why are they letting me see them like this? They're crying for help.
Yeah.
Kids, adults, doesn't make any difference who it is. We need to pay attention to the behavior. We need to pay attention to the words people use, not the meaning of the words, but the words. And ask ourselves, why are these people letting me see them like this? I feel it's because they trust that you can help them. And the question is whether we're going to pick up the gauntlet and we're going to do that. Whether we can do that, that's a decision, that we have to make ourselves.
And the beautiful thing is that even if we can't do it initially, we can learn to do it.
Yes, or we can get someone else
in relationship with them. Well, we can learn from another person.
Yes.
Mentorships and education. You can watch videos by Judi.
That's where my whole podcast came from. Is when I was working with the kids in DYS, when I was working with the kids in alternative schools, when I was running the in-house suspension room, parents, guardians, psychologists were coming to me and saying, I would have 10 kids in my room, in the in-house suspension room, that the teacher couldn't have one of them. I had 10 of them. The whole high school was sending me kids. The teachers would walk by, the kids would be in there working. And they would ask me, how are you doing this? I can't get them to get any work, do any work in my room. It's about trust. It's about respect. And we have to give our students the time to do that. And parents were coming to me and asking me, how can I do this? How can I do this with my child? Where can I get information about this? Because they didn't have money to go and pay professionals.
Yeah.
And so I would get people to, I would call them and get people to give them some advice or have a conversation, or maybe give them a couple of sessions for free. And that's where the podcast came from. Now that I'm retired, I realized that there is a need for people to have a resource, a free resource, where they can begin to connect with professionals who can channel them in a direction where they can get some of the answers they need. I don't expect all my guests to provide services for free, but at least listening to them, maybe contacting them, they can get some information. It's a beginning where I hope that it will be supportive of people who are looking for not necessarily answers, but the right questions to ask. Sometimes that's more important than the answers.
Right. When we share this podcast, we'll share the links to your podcast so that people can access that information. I think that's important. But I think offering them the resource of professionals and other people is important. There's also a lot of what you learned like as in the moment when you were in the experience, right? David Bolton talks about this idea of first person learning. And like almost every sentence that you said today included the word learning. And your learning was first person directed. You were in a situation, you were paying attention, you were learning in the moment, getting feedback, being aware of the children, of yourself, of the interaction. And there's this, I can learn from an expert, certainly. I can learn from other professionals, certainly. But most of my learning, most of my valuable learning happens first person in a situation where I'm consciously there and I'm aware and I'm taking in feedback. And so like one of the things is I hope that we can share our voice with adults, teachers, parents who are working with children and are facing challenges. And you face challenges, I face challenges. We like you said, that everybody begins as a novice, and even you and I, we're not novices, but in some areas we are novices. And like the message I want to say to any adult who's working with children is, it's okay if you're a novice. It's okay that there are things you don't know. You have the ability built into you to learn. If you pay attention and you care and you build a relationship and you interact with the children whose learning you want to steward, you have this built-in capacity to learn. You can learn. You can learn from experts, you can learn from professionals, but so much of what you learned. It's not somebody said to you, hey, Judi, when you're with these kids, this is what you need to do. There wasn't somebody who could tell you what to do. You had that teacher who gave you some guidance on how to write. Mm-hmm. But after that, you sat down with yourself and you said, okay, like this, I'm now aware of something about my own learning. And you kind of learned how to direct your own learning. And when you were in relationship with those children, there were situations that no textbook prepared you for. Nobody told you what to do in that moment. Like, how did you learn? And one of the things why I keep asking you is, how did you learn this? Is how do we offer other people a path into their own first person learning?
We expect that kids in class will learn because we tell them that it's important. They need to learn this to pass. They need to learn this to get good grades. They need to learn this to go to college. They need to learn this to give to the respect to their parents. Kids need to have a more, in my experience, a more immediate reason for learning what it is we want them to learn. And the kids that I was teaching, they had no motivation to learn math. They didn't even have a motivation to learn reading. Most of them, the stuff they were doing didn't involve any of that stuff. I had to put things in context for them. And like the rap that we did, you like rap, you want to write rap, you have to have words, you have to be able to read, you have to know how to use a thesaurus, you have to know how to use a dictionary. In working with the kids in the classroom, one of the things I found was that if you could get one of the kids to buy in to the connection you were trying to make between what you were teaching them and their lives, then it would permeate to the other students, that they would get them excited about it. And I wrote something about that. And so if you'd like, I'll share it with you.
I'd love that.
It's called One Brave Soul. And it says, I sit and watch the smiles of success as losers become winners and swell with pride. At the onset, they declared, I can't do this. It's too hard. Give me something I can do or I won't do this, blank. One brave soul ventures forth, finds an answer buried deep and expository. One by one, the books open wide, discussion blooms and information flies. A unit has been completed, all announced throughout. I haven't learned nothing. This is all BS. But an intruder has broken through, reaching out and touching vacant spaces, silently waiting to be recognized. It rises up and is welcomed with surprise. And I feel when we can illuminate in our kids a connection between what we want them to learn and what they are trying to do, we give them a reason for listening to what we say and for respecting our opinion. If it's just based on because we say so or because it's the rule, with the kids I worked with, it wasn't going to cut it. I had to find other things. And I go into so many classrooms, and there are some amazing teachers who are doing the coolest stuff with the kids on virtual learning. They are breaking out into pods, and they are working together with other students, and they are creating plays, and they are writing stories. And one teacher gave the kids a topic, and she told each pod that they were to write chapter 1 and another chapter 2 and another chapter 3 and another chapter 4, and the kids had no idea what the other kids were writing, and they put this story together, and it was amazing. Creative it was. I believe she gave them the names of the characters, but other than that, she didn't tell them anything. And they had they did some writing. There's some really neat stuff going on, stuff that wouldn't have happened probably if it was in the classroom. And teachers are coming up with some creative ways of keeping the kids' interest and keeping the kids. My grandson is one of the kids who is struggling with the virtual teaching. He's 8 years old, and it's hard for him to sit and listen to a teacher from 8 in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I go to his house once a week. I was going for a while. Now they're getting back into hybrid learning, but I was going once a week and spending some time with them so that my kids could go to work. It was a challenge for him. He's an active kid. He's up, he's moving around. He's trying to listen. He's walking around the chair, and he's trying to be good and to pay attention, but it's hard. And some of the teachers there were just giving them the coolest stuff where he was getting so into developing. He was showing me how he learned to do a PowerPoint. That's pretty amazing, for a young kid to learn how to do a PowerPoint. That probably wouldn't have learned that if he was in class, but he was doing a PowerPoint, and they were putting the other kids in his group were working on a PowerPoint, and they were all going to get together in each class and each pod, and they were going to be presenting stuff to each other. So some amazing things, some remarkable creative lessons are being developed. And I have a feeling that the teachers will continue a lot of this when the kids get into the classroom. And this has been the necessity. This has been the necessity during COVID. And this has been one of the silver linings, I feel, of COVID, that